Hey, what's up guys? In this video we're going to be going over our 5 keys to getting smooth shots with motorized gimbals. We've noticed a lot of people posting videos shot on motorized gimbals that look super robotic, super jerky, and overall just not very professional, and it's usually because you've neglected one or multiple of these 5 keys. So let's dive in. Key number 1 to getting smooth shots is achieving perfect balance. Properly balancing your gimbal is easily the most important yet most overlooked step in getting smooth shots with your motorized gimbal. A lot of people think that you can just mount your camera and the gimbal will do the rest of the work for you. That's partially true, but you still need to know how to manually adjust the different axes so you'll get the best results, or else you'll see a lot of bobbing up and down in your footage and various other unwanted shaky movements. And just be aware that while shooting, your camera can sometimes get unbalanced without you noticing if the plate gets loosened or if you zoom in and out on your lens. So from time to time, or when changing focal lengths, you'll want to turn off your motors and just double check that everything is still balanced well, or else you'll start seeing less than ideal results in the smoothness of your footage. Now we have a full separate video walking you through how to balance your 3-axis gimbal, so make sure to watch that. That way you can make sure to always nail your perfect balance.
All right, key number 2 to getting smooth shots is calibrating your gimbal. Now, after you physically move the arms on your gimbal and balanced it correctly, you'll need to go into your gimbal's dedicated application and calibrate it. Now, for the Ronin S, there's an auto tune button, or we can just hold M and the trigger until the green light starts blinking. Now, when you hit auto tune, your gimbal will automatically set the perfect motor stiffness value based on the weight of your camera. Now, this is important because if you switch anything on your setup between uses and the weight changes, your motors won't have the appropriate stiffness.
Key number 3 to getting smooth shots is taking time to fine-tune the advanced settings. Once you've calibrated and auto-tuned your gimbal for your given setup, next we like to fine-tune our settings in the dedicated app to customize the stiffness of the motors for various types of shots we like to get. And sadly, I found that a good amount of people who own a 3-axis gimbal don't even have the app for the gimbal downloaded. But fine-tuning your settings is what makes a huge difference between that robotic video look and that smooth video look. There's a couple things you need to look for when fine-tuning your gimbal settings. First is deadband. Deadband helps you regulate the gimbal's movement. If you have a higher deadband, which is what I recommend, the gimbal won't start panning the moment I turn my hand. It'll ease its way into the movement. So having a lower deadband will make your gimbal more prone to sudden movements. The other setting you'll need to adjust are strength, speed, and sensitivity. For all 3 of these parameters, I have them set on low so that there's no robotic movements happening with my footage. This makes it feel more like a natural looking glide cam movement and less like a robot. Keep in mind that my ideal settings may not be the exact same as your ideal settings. You'll just have to take 10 minutes to play around with those settings and find the sweet spot that you like. Now, the only times that I really like having the motor strength settings high is when I'm doing shots that I want to look stiff and robotic, like when I'm doing a straight push-in shot for real estate or something where I don't want any movement at all. So depending on the activity that you're shooting, having a lower deadband, higher strength, speed, and sensitivity settings may be a better option. And again, we have a full video going over the exact settings we like to use for fine-tuning our Ronin gimbal, so make sure to check that out for the exact recommendations. And no, we don't have a video on settings for other brands like Zune or Feiyutech or Moza. Personally, we think DJI has one of the best one-handed gimbals out there, so that's the one we use, recommend, and give settings for. And we found that with Zune specifically, their setting parameters aren't as intuitive and don't give you as much control, so it's not quite as easy to get the exact look you want, thus why we choose and recommend DJI.
All right, key number 4 is being aware of the image stabilization within your camera or lens. Now, depending on your camera system and lens, the internal image stabilization may clash with the stabilization of your gimbal. So I've heard it both ways, where internal camera stabilization helps when paired with a gimbal, but I've also heard of it ruining your footage. So based on my research, the internal stabilization of your camera can help when you're doing a simple push-in or pull-out movement, but when it comes to panning and more complicated moves, IBIS or OIS tends to get in the way and cause sudden jerks. So just keep that in mind and run some tests for yourself to see if the internal stabilization of your camera is going to conflict with your gimbal's stabilization, and be ready to turn it off or on depending on the type of shot you're getting.
And our last and 5th key is using good technique. A common misconception about motorized gimbals is that it takes zero technique to operate, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Just like using a glide cam, there are certain techniques that you need to implement in order to get really smooth shots. The first technique is the way that you walk. If you walk like you normally would, every step is going to show up in the footage. This is why we implement what we call the ninja walk, where you let the shock of each footstep be absorbed by the bend in your knees. Another technique that we use to get smooth footage has to do with the steadiness of our arms. Ideally, if you keep the gimbal close to your body, your arms won't get as tired and you won't see as many up and down movements if your arms were in front of you. Especially with our setup, which comes in at about 7 or 8 pounds, it's pretty hard to keep that in the same elevation when your arms are stretched out in front of you. And probably the biggest problem I see with people's gimbal footage is they are either panning or tilting way too fast and or lagging behind and losing their subject in their frame. Now there's a sweet spot when panning or tilting when the motors start to engage, but don't start going too fast. A lot of times what will happen that we see in footage is someone will be doing like a parallax move and they aren't panning enough, so the motors don't engage quite yet, so they turn the gimbal too hard and all of a sudden the motors kick in and it pans way too fast. So it's just going to take some practice and oftentimes multiple takes on a shot to find that sweet spot where the gimbal is panning at the right pace, not too slow, not too fast, and then keeping your hand steady in that sweet spot and not suddenly turning the gimbal one way or the other and screwing up your footage. So make sure to take the time to practice with your gimbal, practice panning, practice tilting, practice parallaxing, practice every type of shot that you think you'll be trying in a real shoot until you get a feel for that sweet spot and feel comfortable with your ability to control the movements of your gimbal. But that's it for our 5 keys to smooth shots with motorized gimbal. In the next video, we'll be going over our top gimbal movements and tips for making them look as smooth as possible. If you have any further questions, please let us know.